The podcast episode you are about to hear is an account of the viewing experiences which befell a trio of 30-something-year-old men, in particular Michael Dixon and his trash film friend John. It is all the more tragic in that they are talking about the first entry in a franchise that declines in quality as it progresses. But, had they watched many, many more of the entries in this franchise, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the madness, macabre, and violence fumbled by big studios. The experience of that movie would lead to a discussion of one of the most beloved and lauded indie horror darlings in the annals of American horror cinema, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Welcome to Afterthoughts, the podcast where we give you your thoughts after we have watched something. We're going to talk about a movie tonight. We're starting our spooky Halloween season.
Spooky. Put the bats in there.
Ooh, yeah, a little lightning strikes.
Oh, there they go. Shit. Oh.
I am your host tonight, Ryan King, and joining me are our regulars, John Garcia.
Hey, we're going to talk about a Texas Chainsaw Massacre that happened in Wisconsin or something. I don't fucking remember what it was.
Where did it really happen?
Yeah.
And the other voice you heard earlier, Michael Dixon.
What's up, guys? Yeah, excited to record with you guys this week. We've been off for a couple weeks, so it's good to get back in the old podcast chair.
Good to rev it up.
Yeah. Takes a little bit to get started. Yeah, I'm going to pull it a few times. 1974, do I have the date right?
That's correct.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.
Sally, I hear something. Stop! Stop!
This is the movie that is just as real, just as close, just as terrifying as being there. Even if one of them survives, what will be left? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
One of the first slashers, and I would say technically the thing that kicked off the slasher genre. Very much independent, very much exploitive, gory, question mark, not necessarily violent, based on a true story, where it's not based on a true story. I was trying to look up when the first based on a true story things really started happening. And then definitely by this point they become really common that everything is based on some true story, when it's not.
It's got to have some exploitation title to it. Adaptsploitation, or I don't even know what it is.
It's amazing how that for some people that just hooks them and makes them like the movie more, even if that's not true at all. Like my mom is always like, I just love movies that are based on true stories. Like she'll watch anything that's based on a true story.
So your mom loves Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, no, she would never watch this. Like they put that tagline in the fucking trailer, and my mom is there to go see that movie. You know?
Well, and I think it's particularly with these horror movies, anything you base on a true story, right? Like I, Tanya, okay, it's not exactly it, right?
That's based on Goodfellas.
Yes, yeah, it really is. Which is also based on a true story, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
But like those, you give up a bit, right, going into it. But I feel like the horror movies really try to make you think that this happened or something happened. And we can get into the myth of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with all three of us having lived in Texas and probably hearing various interpretations of the myth or where it was filmed.
I'm always running
whatever.
Across chainsaw massacres, at least once a week.
Yeah,
just stumble across a chainsaw massacre.
Can't get on the interstate anymore without one of these busting out somewhere.
No,
Yes.
no, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like description of the plot. Some kids in a Scooby-Doo van. Yeah, some kids in a Scooby-Doo van are going to look up, I guess, where this grave robbing is happening to make sure their grandpa wasn't grave robbed. That's just to get them in the area of these killers. They pick up a weird hitchhiker dude and learn not to pick up weird hitchhiker dudes. Some, the kind of usual someone tells to tell them not to go around there or whatever kind of stuff.
Old man at the gas station trope.
Yeah, the harbinger. Our
harbinger of doom. For whatever reason, they wander into someone else's house one by one by two and get murdered.
For whatever reason.
Yeah, in various horrible ways by a man with a chainsaw.
Well, they thought the swimming hole was inside the house.
Once they got over
it's just the most obvious.
Yeah.
I mean,
hey, do you know where the swimming hole is? Yeah.
Look, man, ramps lead places, okay? You got to go up the ramp.
To their credit, there is a massacre. Not to their credit, there's only one chainsaw killing in this movie. Technically. But a lot of chainsaw usage and chasing.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of go around, I guess, and give our initial impressions. I'll just say, this is like my second time watching it, like all the way through. I think, I like slasher films. This one has like a very rough early feel. That going back to it this time, I kind of appreciate, having seen more horror movies, how just like basically this one gets it done without trying to do too much. It doesn't really do the jump scare thing that later movies are really into. The soundtrack is just weird noises.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, which really works. Like, I think it really works, and some of those noises get like overused in other movies later. The fast shots and snaps at the beginning, which totally reminded me of like Seven, the like just like pictures of something horrible. The set design for this being all on like $9 of budget. They just hang shit everywhere, but it works. Like kind of that like dilapidated, crazy design scheme of everything. Like it works. And it's like, it's watchable. It does feel disturbing, and honestly, I think it's only the scene around the dinner table and the subsequent like fight, slow hammering or whatever that goes on that's really, really unsettling. That's interesting. I feel like what makes this work, where another just like independent basic we kill everybody kind of movie doesn't work, which John, you and I've seen so many of
those.
There is a thematic build around this, around the idea of the butcher, the slaughterhouse, the sort of idea of like, what does the pig or cow think in that situation, or what does it feel like to them? And if you kind of get into that view of it, of like, oh, this other I can't comprehend that just kills me and I don't know why, and they just seem unexplainable, like it does give it an interesting sort of lens to look through. That's about it. It's pretty thin, I'll admit, but that's about it. Yeah, and I enjoyed it again on this watch. It's almost more of a historical watch than necessarily like, oh, this is a great movie. But yeah, John, what are your thoughts?
I really liked it. This is my first time seeing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'm not super big into slashers or I don't have any one. Yeah. Well, I don't have any one like particular genre though that I over-index on like wanting to see, and I've been working my way through some of the more classic horror stuff. Like last year, I did Hellraiser, like all of it. I don't think I'm going to do all of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's a bit too much for me for a tall order.
They've remade it like 2 times, I think.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of sequels.
So I'm kind of more like, I watched the first one. I watched the second one immediately after I watched the first one, and I was kind of like, all right, cool. I got what I needed, I think, and I'm kind of done. I enjoyed it. I found it really atmospheric. It's one of those things where like horror is one of the cheapest genres to shoot in and to make, and part of that is you probably don't have to pay a whole lot when you just want bones from like the local butcher or something when they're done with it, or any of these kind of like dilapidated walls and decomposing houses. You definitely don't have to pay a lot of money to find a house that's been foreclosed on somewhere and break in and shoot it. Not saying that they did. I don't
borrow a skeleton from your local middle school and hang it from the ceiling. Yeah.
Honestly, easy enough. And you can make some disturbing shit with it. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't think that I was just going to see very plainly a bunch of teenagers in quotes. They're college kids.
Yeah, they're definitely not teenagers.
Yeah,
I think they're supposed to be, but like every movie, they're not actually teenagers.
Yeah, they're a
And
bunch
also
of 30-year-old
everyone in the
teenagers.
70s. Yeah, everyone in the 70s looks a lot older than they are.
Yeah. the Vietnam
60s
War
just took
affected
a
all
big
of us.
toll on everybody. Yeah.
Yes. I can think of a few shots that I really liked in it that kind of spoke to me as I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like the approach shot after the first dude gets killed, where the other lady is like walking up to the house and you got that cool
The camera goes
shot.
under the bench.
Yeah, it was so fucking cool. I was just like,
Mhm.
oh, fuck, what's going to happen? And it just gets quiet. Also just seeing that dude get hit in the head with a hammer and flop around on the ground for a second was like real fucked up. And I was like, oh God, like I just had a visceral reaction to it. So there were definitely parts that got me.
They made it feel like a farm animal killing.
Yeah, it
Right.
really did.
Yeah.
It did just such a good job of setting it up too earlier. They talked about that in the movie and everything. So I felt like it did a really good job with what it has to set that up. And I could definitely see it being like, we're just doing this for the atmosphere and for the shock value of it. But it still was really powerful. Whereas a lot of the schlock that I've seen that tries to do that, it you can tell it's playing on like, oh, the audience already knows that this is bad, so we're going to do that thing, and then they're going to feel bad about it. But this actually goes the extra mile to make you feel unsettled, to make you feel disturbed. And watching the family interact at the end of it too is just fucked up. Yeah, I liked it. I really enjoyed it. I would go back and watch it again. I got it on 4K and it looked
Nice.
fucking gorgeous, except for can't see shit at night because, that's just night
Yeah.
shots, but
Yeah.
still good. I appreciate they didn't try to shoot a day for night thing for that. It would have sucked. I don't know. So yeah, that was how I felt about it. What about you, Dixon?
That's interesting. Real quick before I dive into it, I watched it on a Blu-ray and they came out with a 4K like 6 months ago. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. But it was shot in 16. So I was like, I don't know if it would really be worth it. But the Blu-ray transfer was fucking impeccable. Like it looked really great. And I'm sure like a lot of the big bright daytime shots would look really good on 4K. But you think it's worth the 4K?
I mean, I picked it up because got the second one as well. So
Oh,
I can't really say
in
if
a
the
combo.
Blu-ray and the I can't really say if the Blu-ray and the 4K do are at odds in any quality loss. But I mean, you want to lend me the Blu-ray, I'll watch both of them side by side and see what goes on.
The Blu-ray looks great. So, don't need to watch it in 4K to enjoy it. But
There you go.
yeah, I liked this movie. I think like it takes a long time to get going. But once it gets going, it gets fucking going real hard. This was such a weird, like dissonant watching experience for me because you have some of the best filmmaking techniques that I have seen in a long time as far as the cinematography is beautiful and really affecting. The editing is incredible and the score, if you can call it that Hooper like co-wrote, it's just a bunch of weird ass noises that just like put you on the edge of your seat and sound terrifying. All of that works incredibly well. The acting is fucking atrocious. Like I don't think any of these people had ever acted before. I don't know. I'm just saying that because I can't imagine that they had, because dear God, the acting was horrible. You could argue that like the weird cannibal family is like kind of fun, weird in a campy way, but like the scene with the hitchhiker dude is just hard to watch. Like it's just such bad acting back and forth, and like it's rough until the killing starts happening. But then once that happens and the kind of the cinematography and editing and the sound take over and the rest of it kind of doesn't matter. Also just a fucking terrible script, like really, really bad script, terribly written dialogue. There really is no plot. I do appreciate that it's like they get you to the thing and they do the thing, right? It's like, let's take you to the Chainsaw Massacre and do the Chainsaw Massacre. They don't, pad it with extra time. This is like what, a 90-minute movie and maybe less than that. And they don't fuck around and do stuff that's unnecessary. Except honestly, you could argue that the first half hour is completely unnecessary. Like just really to get them to where they need to go. I thought like some of the ideas for the concept of the movie were interesting, but the specifics of the script were really bad. Like the idea, and John, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but kind of tying in, a slaughterhouse with human murder and kind of some commentary about, consuming animals and things like that I thought was interesting in the way they kind of framed it, and how like working in a slaughterhouse environment can just desensitize you to violence and, you know, make you act that way toward your fellow man. I thought that was all really interesting, kind of the high concept of the film, but the execution of the script, Jesus Christ, it was bad. So it was kind of a weird, dissonant experience where I'm like, there's incredible talent in this movie and just people who never need to be let near a movie set again. And it was just an odd experience. But you know, thankfully, most of the bad stuff is earlier in the movie, and the latter half of the movie is just kind of a crazy ride and works really well. So overall, I had a good time with it. I was pretty impressed by it for, you know, the shoestring budget that they had. I had seen this once before, but it was a long time ago, and I didn't remember a ton from it. Even like the ending, the final shot is just so cool, and the way I like that it just kind of ends abruptly, and it doesn't. It's almost kind of a cliffhanger. Like you don't necessarily know if the protagonist is okay and escapes, or if she's just like getting into the truck bed of some other crazy maniac and dealing with more things. So, overall, I liked this a lot. I thought it was a fun ride. If you can get past the atrocious acting and script writing, there's a lot of good stuff there.
I would say people that were on that set were learning, Dixon. They were learning how to call out for their friends.
Her.
How many times can we yell Kirk in a row and not say any other words?
How many times can we invade somebody's home and yell, "Anybody there?"
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of decisions that are made against what would be better judgment.
Yeah, that was actually like the one bad editing in the movie. Was like, really, we're just gonna sit here on these people yelling names and like standing at the door of this house forever. Like you couldn't cut some of that.
Yeah, I do have to say, like, for at least for me, the first hour or the first setup of the long setup with the van ride and the hitchhiker and all that was really to establish that I have mixed feelings about these kids, and I honestly wouldn't feel that bad if I saw them die. That was kind of how I approached it, because after a while I was like, oh my God, Franklin, we get it. You have a pocket knife. Gosh.
Yeah.
Like,
Where's
we
my
get it.
pocket
Your
knife?
friends
Hey, do you
suck.
guys think
I
this
gave
sign
you my
means
pocket
something
knife.
on this
Yeah.
van?
You think that man's going to come back for me? That's
You think
called,
he's following us?
It's called an ad lib. When somebody goes, just make shit up. We've got enough film.
Yeah.
Just keep it rolling.
There's a director just like keep over there, like just rolling his hand, like keep going, keep going, keep going.
Honestly, the only thing that I thought would come back was Franklin talks about his beloved pocket knife missing, and how like is it his sister or whoever she is might have it.
Yeah.
And then she's like, I don't fucking have your knife. And at one point she's being like, she's struggling for something. And I was like, she's going to grab the knife. She's going to remember she had it. She just fucking, it's one of those things where it's in your pocket and you forgot. And then she just doesn't like it. None of that happens. I was
Yeah,
like,
man.
oh,
Yeah.
no,
Like,
no,
why
no.
did we have this 5-minute back and forth over nothing? Like,
Just fuck it. Why did we watch Franklin try to get onto the porch, if not to just make accessibility requirements front of your mind?
like I will say the cold open of the movie is great. Like where they're
Yes.
doing
Yeah.
the weird montage. You're not really sure necessarily what images you're seeing, and then they do the radio broadcast and show this corpse that has been excavated and like the face peeled off and just
It's like an
propped up
effigy.
onto this grave, and it's like,
Something,
you know,
yeah.
is that the face that Leatherface is wearing? I don't know, possibly, but that stuff like at the very beginning is really good, and then for
Yeah.
30 minutes you're like, wait a minute, what are we doing? Where did we go?
Yeah. It's like
So
it's like a bad Tarantino film.
Just
We're hanging
Yeah.
out in a van with some hippies.
Just hanging out. That open with the radio, talking about this like quote based on a true story.
Mhm.
They fade from the radio story about finding these corpses and there being grave robbers, which is kind of like setting up some of this for us, to other real radio stories. And so the radio kind of just keeps going, and it's just like other fucked up shit in the world. Like it just keeps like a litany of like fucked up things. Which I do feel like, you know, one thing to kind of talk about a little bit is like 70s horror movies that are kind of this like rejection of like the classic American system, or rejection of the church, rejection of the nuclear family. And this one has some of that, right? Of sort of like this like family that's here is horrible that we see. But that leads to this feeling at the beginning of reality of like hearing the radio story and hearing these other things, even though it's like, what is the county of Muerto? And like there's stuff where they'll say something offhand where you're like, okay, that's like such bullshit. right next to something else that you're like, oh, you have to laugh it off. But yeah, they lead in with these like weird imagery and a radio story, and it kind of like sinks you into it. There's the voiceover at the beginning, like talking about like the horror that these children shouldn't possibly have seen. Kind of like getting you set in the mood. It is kind of a whiplash to then just be like in a van talking to a weirdo, but it is unsettling. Like that whole, like the first few people you meet, like they stop at the gas station, they pick up the hitchhiker. Everyone is just weird. Like you have this like unsettling feeling of like how strange they are and how weird they are. And the hitchhiker just even from the beginning is strange, but once he starts like cutting himself with a knife and like voodoo blowing up their picture.
He took my picture.
Yeah. He stole my soul.
Get
him. You really think he done stole my soul? Shut up, Franklin.
They go past the slaughterhouse and then it pans back to the cows and like zooms in on the cows.
Yeah. Y'all want some head cheese?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, just the hitchhiker talking about how he was like lamenting that they got rid of the old-fashioned killing way.
Yeah, the No Country for Old Men gun.
Yes.
It's too efficient.
Yeah.
The old way. With a sledge. See, that was better. They died better that way.
How come? I thought the gun was better.
Oh, no. With the new way, people put out of jobs.
You need to really feel the life leave the cow when you beat him with a sledgehammer.
I swear he describes that gun the exact same way they do in No Country for Old Men. And I was like, oh my, did they lift this word from word?
Of all the scripts to steal from.
Oh, man. Yeah, that was that part. I would love to hear that guy's thoughts on No Country for Old Men and Javier Bardem. he ain't a real killer. I'll show you a
the
real
old
killer.
ways when we used to kill people with sledgehammers, that was the best way.
Yeah, that ride was very unsettling, partly because that dude was doing unsettling shit in front of those teenagers, but the other part was the teenagers themselves were just talking about weird shit too. Like they were just like
Zodiac stuff and
I had like multiple flashbacks. Not only did I have the No Country for Old Men speech, but in that van, she starts reading off all the shit, like the fucking astrologer.
Yeah, you had an astrologer flashback. You're like angular Neptune in conjunction with.
I honestly was pretty bored during the whole van ride. Like it's kind of unsettling, but like I felt like all the characters were just not interesting. I didn't give a shit about what anybody had to say. Even the weird guy, I kind of got bored of him pretty quickly, and I was like, I get it. He's weird.
Honestly, that sounds like the most immersive experience in a van ride.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It's just you're like, I'll put my headphones on. Fucking until you wake me when we get to Grandpa's.
Yeah, let me know.
When we get to the vacant house that, like, for some reason they are like, are they planning to stay the night at this house with no furniture? Like, what's the game plan here?
We get just the tiniest amount of reason that they're here. And it's unclear how any of them know each other. It's at least two of them. It's their grandpa, right? Question mark.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the blonde and wheelchair guy are
Franklin,
are siblings. Yeah,
because she goes with the cop to go look at the grave, and she comes back and says it's fine, and then he knows about the house and where the river supposedly is, but isn't because no one ever fucking gets to that river.
I have to stop you because
I don't know.
A random dude in a plaid shirt just rolls up to that lady and goes, "Howdy, ma'am, I'll take it from here," and grabs her firmly by the arm and escorts her somewhere. And I was like, is he gonna murder her and her friends just don't care? Like,
most certainly.
Yeah, this is how the massacre starts.
So yeah, and then that's it. Like, we know their names. We know two of them are a couple, and then the rest of it's just not important. Which I'm like trying to think about it. I'm like, I think we get like slightly more background in Friday the 13th on the campers than we get here. Like, there's just really no effort put into it because it's just not like this movie doesn't care. Like, that's not what it's here for. It is absolutely exploitive. It's like, let's kind of roll in, let's get them into a weird situation, let's get things kind of creepy and get you in the mood. And then it's like, and then let's just fuck with you, the audience, through everything else. Because definitely once they wander off And that first kill where he gets hit by the hammer and just like writhes on the ground. And then you see Leatherface and try to figure out like what the fuck he is and he's wearing. And then through the whole movie, every time you see him, he's like got a different face on and like a wig and an apron and lipstick. And like every time you see him, it's something else. And you're like, the fuck is going on with that guy? Which is why he's become like an enigmatic, horror icon, is because it is just an easy, it looks weird right off the bat. It's a little unsettling and you never understand what or why he's doing what he's doing.
And he just makes weird ass groans
and he has like pig sounds and shit in the background.
Yeah, kind of.
Just like a pig squealing always happens when he's on screen. And it's just very unsettling. And then there's the whole chicken room. That whole house is
that
just
house
like
is nuts.
Yeah, I didn't even know.
Why do you? So the couple that is looking for the swimming hole, and they come across this house, and they haven't found the swimming hole yet. Okay, they spend time knocking on this door, like, oh, okay, maybe we can buy some gas from them or something. And like nobody comes to the door, pokes his head in, he sees some terrifying skulls on a blood red wall, and he's like, you know what? Maybe I should just wander on in here and keep asking if someone is home. Just trespass into this house, and that is clearly full of violent people, and I'm sure it'll be fine. They'll just point me to the local watering hole.
That's the thing of like, you walk into a house and you see dilapidated wallpaper, you know that whoever is there, this isn't your moment. Like, oh, somebody could be depressed in here. I could save their life by showing up. It's like, nah, this place is abandoned. Whoever squats here, they'll turn a knife on you and be like, you here for my property? Immediately. And I was, that whole wall of heads. Also, like, doesn't one of the other dudes, I'm just going to say his name is Chip because he looked like a chip. He's just going to show up and he's like, hey, Bethany, Kirk, are you here? And then he goes,
stop fucking around, guys.
He thinks they're actually in there.
It's a big old wall full of dead heads. That's impressive. He like wanders into the fucking slaughter kitchen.
Not the swimming hole where they said they were going, but he's convinced that they have to be at that house for some reason.
That guy follows up. There's a knock coming from inside a freezer. And he's like, I gotta open that.
This is just like one of those, what's that that bullshit, I don't know if it's bullshit, but that thing that they use as a scientific crutch in M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, where they're like, oh, you smell this gas from trees, and it makes that part of your brain that says don't kill yourself flip off so you kill yourself. It's like everybody
John,
in this
you're the only one who's seen that.
Oh, that's a lie. There were mass audiences who were riding the high of signs and all disappointed as well. Saw that shit.
Stop justifying the fact that you own that on Blu-ray.
But yeah, like everybody has their like self-protective senses turned off for this movie.
I do think
they are like some of the all-time dumbest characters in the history of cinema.
Oh yeah. This does have the like run upstairs to get away, but I will give it the credit of she doesn't know that Leatherface came from that house. So when she runs up the stairs, she thinks she's going to find someone to help her. And she does jump clear out the window to get away from him when she gets the opportunity.
I would have thought as well that she would have crawled out a window first. That maybe is in one of the other rooms.
She jumped through 2 plate glass windows.
Flew through it.
Yeah, like honestly.
Yeah, and then she does it again a second time.
She deserved to escape.
No, I was going to say from like what I was talking about earlier of kind of like throwing out, the 70s starting to like throw out some of the older views. I do think there was this idea of like small town friendliness, right? Where people didn't lock their doors. I heard about that when I was younger of like, people don't lock their doors. And then eventually enough horrible things kind of happened that people heard about. I think horrible things were always happening.
Yeah.
Well, then you put lead in your gasoline and you drive your cars all over the open country in small towns.
Yes, everybody's lead
Also, you
poisoning.
have the local news that just becomes like
3 murders happened this evening when a local insane person killed 3 teenage girls.
You just end up with sensationalism.
And you get some high profile murders and a broader news reach through the times into the 60s, and you start to get this unsettling feeling of like someone is going to come get me, right? And we start to see that pop up in these horror movies. And so I do have the feeling that like this movie is kind of giving you that like, yeah, small towns are fucking creepy. And like you think you can trust your neighbors, but like look at these neighbors, like you couldn't possibly trust them in any way. They're just horribly fucked up. But yeah,
you can't even trust your local barbecue joint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who can
yeah.
we trust?
Yeah. Like you might order some brisket and you end up getting some human thigh meat. You just don't know.
You end up smoking on your finger sausage like Franklin.
Yes.
Like rolling around like Winston Churchill with his fucking
I was
wheelchair.
like, what the fuck is in his mouth? What is going on with that? Like,
yeah. Anyways, Ryan, you were saying.
Yeah, no. I was gonna say through that, throwing those kind of out the window. Talking about the editing, I think that's one of the things that really makes this seem much more violent and scary.
yeah, for sure.
Because it does sort of use somewhat the Hitchcock like cutaway from Psycho. That one's a whole bunch of quick edits.
There's a lot of Psycho influence on this movie for sure.
Yeah, there are these really kind of like quick edits right before something visceral happens, and your mind kind of continues the shot. Like the timings are kind of like fucked up from a natural edit, and your mind kind of finishes the shot without actually seeing what happens. Or there's a zoom in on something and then it cuts away. And yeah, a lot of that adds to this unsettlingness that just even from like watching something would be unsettling, but also it being in this like disturbing action scene where it cuts in all these weird ways just adds to it.
Yeah, definitely. The editing is incredible in this. Like there's a lot of fast-paced cuts, and the way that they pull in just random terrifying images and kind of cut them together, and you're not really sure necessarily what's going on in parts, but it's just like a visceral experience. And like the scene where the final survivor is in the home of the weird cannibals, and they're like strap her to a chair and they're taunting her and like eating human flesh next to her, and she's freaking out, and they keep zooming in on her eye, and like her eyes darting around the room, and they cut back and forth from that to what she's seeing and kind of her reaction in her eye. And it's really well done the way they edit the whole film together, except for those long scenes of them shouting for their friends into the darkness.
It just went too long. The whole family scene, yeah, that's I really think because that goes on. So yeah, really, I was like the turn is she gets away from Leatherface to the gas station and then just dragged right back into it because their gas station. But yeah, everyone in this town is on this almost is what it feels like. But now we realize this is a whole family and not just one crazy guy wearing leather on his face. And yeah, they have her strapped to the chair, having this fucked up family dinner. And yeah, they're fucking with her. And it really is like even the scene before when she jumps out the window and she's like fucked up and, running and injured. The absolute like horror she has when she gets to the gas station, like convinced it's going to happen, like can't even talk, like out of breath. And then when old man, he has a name, I can't remember. No, Grandpa's the even older.
The very
just
old
the gas
man.
station guy.
Yeah,
the gas station guy.
Robert
It's
Forster.
like Sawyer.
Sorry, not Robert Forster.
Definitely not Robert Forster.
It's spelled differently.
I was gonna say he's billed as old man in this one and Cook in the second one, but he actually has a name and they say it. I can't, but they just bill him that way for whatever reason. He like comes back with like the rope in the bag, and she's like, "Oh no, this is fucked up," like whatever it is, and she fucking fights him off until he starts hitting her, and so it's always these like very drawn out, visceral things that are happening. Right, it takes multiple hits with the hammer. Like there's this, these fights, these struggles, and she's actually trying to fight back and struggle and does some, like get some back, which I also think is really in Halloween. That was one thing I always like appreciate about the first Halloween is Laurie Strode fucking fights at the end of that, right? And that feels so much more realistic than so many of these other horror movies where they just like fucking run off and then
they just go
get
like
killed. Like,
full hysterical and don't try to do anything. They're just screaming forever. Yeah.
But yeah, you just sort of get that scene from there of like it just constantly being like, what are they going to do to her? When is this going to end? What more crazy thing could happen? Certainly by the time they wheel Grandpa down the stairs, and even if the makeup on that's pretty questionable and it's unclear what's going on there, it is still fucked up.
I thought for the longest time that he was dead and they were just keeping him around, and then he started moving. Oh my god, what the fuck? Didn't he have was like grandma up there with him when she discovered? I feel like there were two people in that room.
There's a grandma up there.
Yeah, there's a grandma.
They didn't bring her down for dinner, just Grandpa.
Yeah, I don't know why.
The second one
She's in the second movie.
That. Ryan knows.
Yeah, John and I can talk about the sequel, I guess, as well. The second one kind of like plays a little bit more with the family a little bit longer, and like vaguely attempts to give some minor amount of backstory. But yeah, the mom is also in that one, and they seem way more obsessed with chainsaws versus it. In this one, it just almost seems like he just has a chainsaw, like he just uses that as part of his thing, and he just happened to have that, and that's what he ran out with. Where the next movie is very chainsaw obsessed.
Yes. Well, the next movie is also a canon film, which means quality.
Right.
It's just good
Yeah, we
shit.
gave
There you
in.
go.
We gave
Yeah.
in completely into the
Was Hooper
insanity.
involved with any of the sequels?
Yes, Hooper directed the sequel.
Oh, okay.
He directed the sequel, and then he like is mainly like either produced or or had nothing to do with it because the rights got completely fucking nuts. This is one of those movies where who owned it, who could use what parts of it got way screwed up.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing with Friday the 13th. It took a long time to get that sorted out as well. So yeah, the second one is very tonally different. Just
Agreed.
that it's hard to
Yes.
understate how
Is
totally
it like a
different it is.
musical or something?
It's
What are we
like a
talking
comedy. It's just
It's much
so
more comedic. Yeah.
absurd and fucking weird. And Dennis Hopper's in it.
Oh, okay. I'm
And
interested.
half of it is Dennis Hopper running around screaming with chainsaws.
I'll take you to hell. And then
yeah.
chainsaw
It's
something.
just Dennis Hopper. Like they were like, and you can tell it's a canon film tactic. They were like, we need a big name. Let's get Dennis Hopper to come into this and be a cowboy sheriff or whatever he's some law enforcement.
It's like an
dude.
ex-marshal. Yeah.
He's Franklin's uncle, brother, something. So he's related to Franklin, and he's
somehow
like,
related to Franklin.
he's been trying to avenge his brother's death for 14 years since the Texas Chainsaw Massacre happened. That's his whole backstory, and they ramp up his whole dramatic stakes, and you're like, oh, Dennis Hopper's gonna be in it, and then he's fucking gone for like
he
a solid
disappears
chunk
for a
of it.
significant chunk.
Then he
I'm
comes back in with
disappointed.
chainsaws. Just
I'm
doing
disappointed that he's not a cannibal. That seems right up his alley.
No,
I thought he was
Dennis
going to be
Hopper
helping.
as a crazy cannibal would be
Yeah.
perfect.
He does-
Like, that's
he does, yeah.
typecasting, really.
Yes.
He has this like weird chainsaw obsession. There's a whole scene where he's like going to buy chainsaws and try out chainsaws, and he goes to try it out, and he's just like wailing on a tree, and the guy that runs the chainsaw store is like
Dude,
turned
he's
on
like the
by it.
horniest Texan I've ever seen for a chainsaw. He's like, well, sir, oh my God.
Yeah. And then Dennis Hopper takes 3 chainsaws, and he's carrying around 3 chainsaws, like 2 on his side and 1 in his hands at the end of the movie. Yeah, it
So-
gets quite crazy.
As you can
Oh, I
tell,
was-
a tonal departure from
Uh,
some teens who went to the watering hole and got chainsawed.
I had never seen the second one. This was my first watching of the second one. The first line of the movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, is "Hook 'em horns."
What?
Yes, it
It
happens
takes
on like
place-
OU Texas.
It takes
weekend.
place on OU weekend and
Oh my
constantly references the Texas OU game and various.
This is very
competitions
timely
between
then.
it.
Yeah, honestly,
Yes.
it's great.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
this
I
will
was-
probably post after the game, but we're recording
Yeah.
about a week
I was like,
before.
this is amazing.
Yeah. Also, it doesn't make Longhorns look good from that dude
No.
that says "hook 'em horns." He's a piece of shit. It opens the movie with some piece of shit UT guy.
Well,
I
you
was
know,
like,
Yeah, it's
we,
like
have,
these
we
two-
have those, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're like
Animal.
shooting a gun out the window and just shooting shit as they drive by.
Like Rich Texan from The Simpsons kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and they're
Yes,
shooting
yeah.
signs that say like the Battle of San Jacinto and the Battle of the Alamo. Just
Yes.
shooting them with
They're
guns.
shooting-
Remember the Alamo? No!
It's exactly
Yeah.
that.
They like play chicken with another truck, which then comes back later and turns out that truck happened
Don't
to
spoil
be
it, Ryan.
Leatherface or something. Yeah. Well, no, this is like the first fucking 5 minutes of the movie.
It's a great movie. Okay, it
yeah.
deserves to be seen.
Do they at least
It-
chop up some OU fans?
No,
No.
Dude. They show a band go by in the distance, and they don't even chop the band.
Yeah,
up.
I would actually say
Disappointing.
there's maybe fewer killings than the first movie, but they're all way more. They're canned up because they actually have Tom Savini as well, so the effects work
Oh, hell yeah.
is a lot more
See the
going
dude
on
from The
there.
Thing?
No, he's done.
He's the Friday the 13th was his first thing.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So he had several of Friday the 13th and a lot of very. I don't know if he did the thing, but
Dude,
yeah, a lot of
wouldn't it be fucking killer if Leatherface ran out onto the field during OU weekend, and I mean literally
Dance.
killer,
dance
and
with his
nobody
chainsaw.
realizes what's happening.
thought
That's
it was
like
part
the
of the show.
climax of Texas Chainsaw 2.
That was an interesting halftime show this year. It's a bit,
that was
bit
weird.
off-brand.
Comes out
but-
and he just fucking dances. And
Guess
throws
it
his
is
chainsaw
October.
around.
I don't know.
We've got a chainsaw twirler this year, folks.
And now it appears
Yeah.
there's a naked chainsaw twirler on the field.
Really risking it all out there.
There's so many things I could talk about in that second one.
Yes, I'm sure there are.
Because
We didn't
it's
watch
got
the second
so
one,
much more
Ryan.
going on. Yes. The second one I'm like, it is something else entirely. It is not like this Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's more aligned with the slashers that come afterwards,
Mhm.
where it kind of has like there's a plot that we're going through. We're establishing some things. We're finding it
Yeah.
out as we go.
That's
And then
kinda
there's like funny
unfortunate.
things that happen like among the horror. Dennis Hopper's like trying to help the girl get up out of something, and he just grabs something nearby him, and it's a skeleton arm. And so the hand of the skeleton is like reaching down for her to grab onto, and she like, grabs the skeleton's hand. It's like that kind of like dark humor.
Visual gags.
Yeah, and visual gags.
Yeah, I would say like the second one. I talked to somebody recently who was telling me they would just watch the second one, and they were like, I did not like it. I didn't enjoy it at all. And I think that it's when you come in from the first one and how strong the atmosphere and the tone and what it's trying to do are, and you expect that the second one is going to be that same thing, you're gonna be disappointed. The score is a lot more by the numbers in the second one.
Yeah, it's a regular
unfortunately.
score.
yeah.
And so there's way more of like, you can tell when the movie's trying to make you feel a certain way. The other thing is the second one has, as like exploitative and kind of like packed as it can be for a canon film, had way more sexuality than I expected.
Oh.
Yeah.
And way more awkward. So Dixon, picture if you will, Leatherface is about to saw a woman in half. And
Okay.
she starts saying, you're good. You're a good boy. Like, you're good.
Oh.
And slowly, as he edges his blade towards the crotchal region of the woman, she continues to tell him that he's the best. And he makes full eye contact with her and like licks his weird Leatherface lips. And they have like that sequence. And he's just gotten done chainsawing a full igloo, like cooler full
for
of
no
beers
reason?
and
I don't
sodas.
really
So
understand,
she's
yeah.
just like soaking wet.
Yes, yeah, it's sprayed all over
and
her.
is like, oh yeah, you're good. You're the best. And he just gets so revved up, literally, in his chainsaw that he runs out of the room and doesn't know what to do with himself. And I was like, I am so glad I didn't watch this as a kid, because one, I'd be terrified, and
Yeah.
I'd also have some weird awakening that would
Very
fuck me up
confused.
forever. Like, just could not.
Are they trying to say that like, oh, he never had like a mother that loved him, and that's why he chainsaws people, and like he just needed some?
No.
I
love
just
in
think
his
that it's
life
like
or something?
sexual repression of the chainsaw.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
It's just the sort of like him being a simple, or whatever mental issues he has, and then the dad is the only figure he seems to have, which is fucking.
Mhm.
If you want to have that same exact actor, the dad, yelling over and over again how much of a fuck up
Yeah.
his boys are, whoa boy, that's like half the second movie.
it is. It's a much more
Um,
of a Three Stooges portrayal
Yes.
of the family.
I could
but
see
yeah,
that.
no,
I think
like
you
the-
kind of get that in the first one a little bit.
Mhm.
in the
A little
Three
bit.
Stooges vibe. But also, his sons are doing exactly what he wants them to be doing. Like, they're following in their dad and grandfather's footsteps and mercilessly murdering cattle and human alike. I don't
He gets
know. It
angry
seems
that they're
weird.
kind of shitty at it, like they fuck up his door.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well,
Not
that's
that
his
Grandpa
fault.
is as good as he used to be, even though they keep letting him try.
He's a
And-
legend, one hit wonder.
Yeah.
They give him like 12 cracks at it. They just keep putting the hammer back in his hand and keep watching him drop it into the bucket.
It's only so many mulligans you can give an old man before, it's just time to put him
Yeah.
out to pasture.
I will
Get
say
it,
the
Grandpa,
worst
you're
thing-
the best.
Get him, you got him. The worst thing about the second one is that they pretty much just redo that whole scene
They do.
with wheeling out the grandpa and having him take the hammer and all that. And at that point, like, especially having just watched the first one, I'm like, yeah, right. Like,
Well, they do it, but they do it in a Tim Burton-esque set where it's not
Yeah.
just a
Oh, yeah.
house. It's an underground funland that's clearly an abandoned carnival that they've turned into a bone circus. I don't fucking know what that is, but
yeah,
like
that sounds like not
the whole
along
table
the
is
vibes
like made of
what the
people
movie's about.
and the
Yeah.
chairs are all like gigantic skeletal Gothic structures. And you're like, how did this
yeah, there's all
family
these
do any of
Christmas
this?
lights all like everywhere.
Yeah.
I do like
anyway.
Dennis Hopper runs in and he sees a skeleton in the wheelchair and immediately assumes that it's his brother / nephew.
Oh.
And then he runs by, like, through the course of the next, like, 10 minutes, 2 more wheelchairs and corpses. That I was like, how does he know which one is his? Like, or does it just
Yeah.
make him remember? I don't know.
There's
And
a
I'm
lot
like,
of
why would he be
questions.
here anyway? Yeah, I even got to that point where I was like, did they take all the bodies from their house and then drive them all the way to near Dallas that they end up?
Somehow watching that movie, I knew. Now I have a little Ryan in my head who fucking says this exact shit to me. This is all your fault, Ryan. I can't watch a movie without being like, why where would they get the bones from? Where's the electricity coming from?
Yeah, right. Who's paying the electric bill?
It sounds like the most unrealistic thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is that anyone at all would care that Franklin has died.
Yeah. That is honestly, I was the most shocked when I found out that was like the core driving for Dennis Hopper.
I will say the second one, they established that they make money. Like they have a way to make money.
Well, they work at the slaughterhouse, right? And they sell human
the first
barbecue.
One, like maybe, I don't know. But yeah, they sell barbecue. And the second one, they established they have a very successful meat catering business.
Yes. And it is, they win chili cook-offs.
Exotic game.
Yeah, they won the Texas OU chili cook-off 2 years ago.
Oh my God. Like Eric Cartman chili type of thing.
Yeah, Scott Tenorman, straight up. But yeah, so that is the tonal difference between Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and 1. If you go into it out there, you're expecting the same thing, you're not going to get it. It's not at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But it's a canon film, so you should expect it.
Yeah. It just completely off the wall at that point. I will say it had one jump scare that actually got me, because jump scares don't fucking get me, because I just kind of know where we're at. There's this whole thing with the girl that's on this radio, and one of the kids, or the not Leatherface, but would have been the hitchhiker, but it's his twin brother or something, essentially.
Sure.
Question mark. I guess he was off at the Vietnam War in the first movie.
He went to Vietnam. He talks about Vietnam War fucking him up, and he has a metal plate in his head.
Yeah.
Is this Randy Quaid from Christmas
Vacation? I was just going to say, very Randy Quaid of him.
Well, don't go put none of that stuff on my sled, Clark. You know that metal plate in my head?
How can I forget?
I had to have it replaced because every time Catherine revved up the microwave, I'd piss my pants and forget who I was for a half hour or so.
He is doing this whole fucked up scene where he has her like kind of by herself at the radio station, and he's like taunting her, and it's weird and unsettling or whatever. And they're to the side of it is the room with like all the records in it. And he legitimately, like, he's just been walking around like asking things about the radio show and all that for like quite a while. And then he like looks over and he's like, "Oh, is this a room where all the records are kept? Like, this is where you keep them?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then fucking Leatherface comes running out of that room, which is like, it's not established that he came here or that this guy is related to him or like anything, or how he came in, went in that room, turned off the lights, and just sat there for 30 minutes waiting.
None of it.
So like legitimately, I was like, "Oh shit, Leatherface is in there!" Like, oh fuck.
See,
that was one of the few times it gets me.
I watched that and I was like, I fucking know, but they let it go for so long, I forgot about it. I was like, "You son of a bitch, you did it to me. You got me." But yeah,
that's funny.
So I wanted to talk quickly on the sort of like the quote true story this is based on, the impact the movie has had as people still think it is based on things. And just, generally kind of the impact it had, culturally from there. So I would say the closest thing this is based on is supposed to be Ed Gein, who technically was not a serial killer, but he was a grave robber. And so I think a lot of the chunk in this movie with the grave robbing, using those body parts to do whatever fucking weird shit in your house and make stuff, that was something Ed Gein did.
Was he just robbing graves to like steal their jewelry and shit, or was he like doing weird shit with the
bodies? Full
bodies?
flesh. I read the Wikipedia on this guy.
Yeah. He was like using them for leather.
Yeah, he had like, what is it, like several lampshades made out of head skulls and like women's he had a shoebox full of vulva.
Oh my. This sounds more like Silence of the Lambs kind of shit.
Well, that's also based on Ed Gein. Yeah. So yeah, he had like a dress I think he had made as well, like out of skin. So yeah, and I would say part of Psycho, it was somewhat on that, because there was like his mom, and he kept his mom's dead body too. Right. And so like Psycho has some basis, from Ed Gein. Silence of the Lambs does, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like he's kind of kept popping up. And I think somewhat, the other things like the Zodiac Killer and, other killers have then kind of added more to the mythos over time that get borrowed from. That is this like obsession with not understanding it, right? That we try to get some sort of like coming to grips with this thing that we can't understand and using the movies as kind of some side of catharsis around that. It is interesting to me that that Ed Gein pops up because honestly, he's a dude that just fucking did some weird shit with graves, and then somehow it becomes this like grand myth of a chasing people around with chainsaws or whatever. Like it got so much more complicated.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's because he did that weird shit and then he murdered somebody and then they found out he did that weird shit and they like
Yeah, there were
exposed
like
it.
2 girls or a girl and a guy or something that ended up at his house that he did kill. And then, yeah, I kind of just unraveled from there.
Mhm.
I will say I heard as a kid, and from other people I've talked to, like small town stuff in Texas where it just comes up where they're like, oh yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre here happened here. The thing that it's based on happened here. Or a lot of times the house that it was filmed at is here. I would hear all the time. None of which are true.
Yeah.
It was just like that playground mythos. The house does still that they filmed at does exist. It's like a fucking restaurant now or something. And it's not
terrifying. Don't eat there. Don't do that.
You can see the van that those kids were driving in. That's out in Bastrop near the Slaughter Barbecue, I believe is what it's still called.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to go to Slaughter Barbecue, they've got that.
Does it still have that blood sign on the side?
I'm sure it does.
You think that means something?
At midnight I hear there's a ghost voice that can be heard saying, you sure they're not coming for us? You sure? And when you turn around and tell him to shut the fuck up, he's gone.
The lamest, most annoying ghost.
Yeah.
Shout out to Franklin. You went out.
Franklin.
You went out in a blaze. I'm sorry, buddy.
Wait, hold on. Is that what Franklin Barbecue is based on?
Conspiracy grows deeper. I think it's interesting though that this, like, as a quote based on a true story, has more impact in people thinking that it was even to today to some extent.
Yeah.
That like, I mean, Blair Witch Project, people were really obsessed with at the time, but I kind of think everyone like kind of not somewhat quickly were like, nah, it didn't happen. Like kind of got over it. Whatever the Amityville horror shit, that still sticks around. Wherever the Warrens are into this week, that somewhat has stuck around as supposedly being real.
Yeah, except the rights for those are very not real. You don't have to have the rights to make an Amityville. Anybody can make a fucking Amityville movie. And
Right.
I know that because I watched
Because he made one.
That was, I made one.
Don't watch it, folks. It's bad.
Please don't. Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that I kind of thought about when I was watching this was it's so prevalent even when you don't watch a horror movie that Texas Chainsaw has permeated like just any culture. It's not even ours. Like there's Japanese horror games that have chainsaw like wielding enemies who have like disfigured faces or they have bags on their faces or people's faces on their faces. Like just that kind of like Leatherface is no longer technically like the iconic one and only. There's plenty of others that follow and are copycats in a way. And I think that like, that's never really, for me, in terms of like other horror movies, people have tried to do it since then. It's almost one of those things where it's like, we found this combination of man plus thing that's so terrifying. A man plus chainsaw plus the faces of other people is just horrifying. Let's do, man plus nail gun, man plus safety pin, man plus any of these. These are all real movies with like murderers who do. Which fucking movie is it? Somebody kills everybody with a safety pin. It's a giallo. They literally use a gigantic novelty size safety pin to stab people.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how bottom of the barrel can we get with something like, what are you going to use a fucking eraser and choke a person and that makes you a serial killer? But like the concept of Leatherface has transcended even through the chainsaws. And the entire time I watched it, I was like, yeah, like there's something deeply unsettling just of like the moment you see him come out and hit that dude in the head. Like I had a jump scare from that, not even just because it's like, oh God, but just because my brain was like, that's a person. No, it's not. Oh, fuck. I don't know what that is. And then immediately he just recedes back into the shadows. And I was like, that fucking lives with me now. I just can't stop thinking about that terrifying image. Taps into something primal, and it was just wild. I've not seen. I think it's also like the cinematography really ramps it up for you, and so you're like building that tension the whole time to get to that point of like, oh fuck. Other horror movies now just can't even. I can't think of like a time. I think Ari Aster. We talked about Hereditary, and that plays with some of those too, where it's like. The darkness, the level of darkness is just enough for your like instinctual senses to try to see if there's somebody in it, and that fucks you up psychologically. Whereas, modern Texas Chainsaw, probably the other horror movies that are made by the numbers, Conjuring, that kind of stuff. It's like the score is all that tells you that you're supposed to be scared.
Right.
And the actual atmosphere is not there. None of it is really scary if you look at it that way. But I feel like even without the score, without whatever the score is for Texas Chainsaw.
Oh, sure. It would still be very effective.
That shit's really fucking disturbing.
It is. I would say it's interesting with the chainsaw. Like, you're right that became such a horrifying thing from here after. And supposedly Hooper was like at a store, like a sporting goods store or something, and there was like a crazy long line. And he like looked at the chainsaw and was like, I could just get through all the people with the chainsaw. And then was like, that'd be a good movie. But it's like that then becomes kind of an iconic thing. You're right, like in video games and comics, and of like a chainsaw, in the same way that like now you can never see an old hockey mask the same way either. Like that just was the right level of unsettling that then it got put there, that then now that's what you see, where so many other times it just doesn't work.
Have y'all seen Mandy?
Oh yeah. I've seen
I've not seen Mandy.
Love Mandy. There's a chainsaw fight, like a sword fight in Mandy with chainsaws, and they're like 9 feet long. It's fucking
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 has chainsaw fights.
They have
if you
chainsaw
love
fights.
those,
okay.
There's plenty more of them.
As soon as Dennis Hopper came with the chainsaw, I was like, there needs to be a chainsaw. There has to be a chainsaw fight.
I knew there was gonna be, and there was.
Did Giallo kind of invent the the slasher film? Like, was Argento the first one to do this, and then it kind of came to America and went from there? Like, we're talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a very influential film, but it's clearly pulling from things like Bird with the Crystal Plumage and Psycho and stuff, and kind of combining some influences.
There's a few movies before that are kind of where it starts to go off. Psycho is definitely kind of the start, I would say, of anything that kind of forms into a slasher.
Yeah.
And there are a couple early, it's like Bloody Sunday, I think is what it's called, Stateside. That's kind of what kicked off Giallo, and starts that kind of piece where the sort of like, you just see their hands and they're in shadow, and all this stuff that kind of like builds up that Giallo does. A lot of that didn't necessarily make it stateside to have too much of an effect at the time, like mid to late 70s it does, but early, not on all of the movies per se. I do feel like there's a bit here, I agree, because this has a bit more of the like visceral level.
Yeah, for
that
sure.
Also, I would say, comes from George Romero, because that's actually like, and that was another independent film that was a big deal that had much more of the like violentness that you didn't necessarily see before this. Yeah, Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
And then, I'm trying to remember where Silent Night, Deadly Night, and Camp Sleepaway would have been later. There's a few other around that time that kind of started
Sleepaway Camp. Oh, that movie is.
Yeah, Sleepaway Camp. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of the one that cements the archetype for a slasher movie, where you kind of have this villain that's sort of unexplained. You don't really see them. Their face is covered. Usually, they're sort of just like an embodiment of horrible. They don't even talk. They're superhumanish, maybe. You kind of have the teens who are maybe doing something they ought not to or whatever. And then
clearly
one girl
setting
lives.
the stage for Halloween and Friday the 13th and stuff like that.
Yeah. I would say, like, in terms of Giallo influencing it, I don't see this being super influenced by Giallo. I don't feel that it saw that and thought it was what it needed to be. Because Giallo, while it has like graphic kills, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of horror in some of the things that happen there. It's more
like
about
more mystery.
It's more about the mystery and the thrill.
Mm.
And this even gets ingested into Juan Pico Simone's 1982 Pieces, which is a giallo film that has a chainsaw wielding black gloved killer who goes around hacking up people at like a college campus. So
I guess because of like the killer POV that you get, there's less horror and more like what's going on here.
Yeah, because you're
intrigue.
you're too aware of where the killer is at any one point in time. So you're like, oh fuck, it's happening. Like, I wonder who this could be. And they throw that mystery way on here. Whereas this is like that urban legend kind of conjuring aspect of, hey, we're around a campfire. I'm going to tell you about something that you could never stop coming to kill you, or like coming to get you. It's out there. And even the ending, while it's ambiguous for the hero who like gets away, it's also ambiguous for the family that's left behind of like, are they still out there? Like, what the fuck's happening? They never try to wrap up. They don't do like a CB radio or like any police chatter about them being arrested.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of like, this could fucking happen still. Who knows?
I would imagine that the local sheriff knows all about them, and it's just like, nope, I'm not going over there.
They have an agreement. I have an agreement. It's just like the Yakuza. Just done.
The final shot of Leatherface just like swinging his chainsaw violently in the middle of the street with the sunset in the background. It's like such a beautiful shot. And then they just hard cut to credits to just end the movie. And it's just like a really... it ends, you're on such a high as the movie ends, and it just kind of pulls the rug out from under you, and you're like, wait, what the fuck? It's over now?
Yep.
And I feel like it's a really good way to end the film because, you're not going to wrap a neat bow. I don't want to see the cops come in and like have some sort of demise to the villain in this thing. Like, it ends in a perfect way where you're scared out of your mind. You don't know if the one protagonist left is going to make it, and you just get this horrifying shot of the villain super mad, flinging
Just
a chainsaw around,
losing
contrasted
it in
with
some
this
bizarre-
absolutely gorgeous sky behind him with the setting sun.
Yeah.
You don't want to see the like long drawn out trial of Leatherface.
The siege
like, and the
upon their house
appeals.
where the FBI is just
Yeah.
weeding them out. Yeah.
The
As
like
in the
multiple
Scorsese
appeals.
version.
Yeah.
After Leatherface has written a tell-all book about how he got away with it. And he's still giving inspirational seminars to this day.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to eat people.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So I just had one more thing. So John, I'm curious, as a vegan watching this movie, if you had any like particular insights into, there seems to be, I don't know if it's like active commentary or kind of more passive commentary on, humanity eating meat as a life source, and obviously the correlation between people who work in those environments and the desensitization of violence and what they do in their normal lives is interesting. But there's even like in the opening scene of the van where that girl's like, I can't believe people eat meat. Like, we shouldn't be doing that. And like there is like an open statement about it at one point in the movie.
Yeah. And to me, part of it read more as like, we just need something to tie this together. It's not that I don't have faith that Tobe Hooper had good faith in making some of that dialogue happen, but I do feel like in an environment where we're heavily meat-based, culture, we really ingest a lot of, we kill a lot of chickens and we kill a lot of cows and we ingest a lot of both. That
I am
was really more
currently
like,
drinking out of a Popeyes cup.
yeah,
So.
I mean, hey, and I think that it was really one of those things where like, when writing it, they were like, what could make people on the fence about these hippies? And like the cynic in me just says that that's kind of the take that was going on. And that beyond that, like
these pompous vegans.
Yeah,
like,
I see that because like at one point she's like, I don't want to talk about that. And they're like, no, it's much more humane now. You don't hit them with a sledgehammer, you hit them with this gun and it drills into their brain and kills them immediately. And she's like, well, I still just don't want to talk about it. Sure, I like it. I just don't want to talk about it. Like that claim.
One of the female characters does say, she's like, I can't believe people eat meat.
But like, I feel like the same one, or maybe the other woman says like, well, you can talk. I don't really want to talk about it, even if it's more humane to kill them that way. I just feel like we shouldn't talk about it. We should just do it. Like, let's just eat them. But I do feel like you can make the argument for it that it could make you a lot more cognizant of how another animal feels, because Leatherface fucking slugging that dude with a hammer and watching his body spasm out.
Yeah, I felt like I was watching a chicken with its head cut off.
Yeah, when you're doing the same, you're watching that instinctual brain, and I think that's the connecting tissue to like make that leap for you. Like you look into the eyes of another animal and you think about what they're thinking about. And like for me, that was a really intense moment where not only did I see a human die, but it was like, hey, like, yeah, we are fucking animals. And there's these cows that have that experience like every day of their life is just being, there's a whole movie that was made dedicated to the woman who made slaughtering cows more humane. And I thought it was kind of funny because the whole movie is about her being like, these cows are just so scared of being killed. We should make slaughterhouses more comforting to them so they can be killed without knowing it's going to happen.
So the meat won't be so tough.
Yeah. And part of that to me, like, and I've seen the trailer for that movie and it's like got an inspirational tone.
Oh my God.
And I'm just hilarious. Like, what the fuck is this movie? This is insane. But at the same time, like, I get it. Like, you want to eat meat. You want to feel good about it. Like, there's only so many steps you can take to separate.
How do we make our
from
concentration camps more hospitable?
Yeah. And so, like, yeah, as a vegan, like, I saw it and I was like, it's the Leo DiCaprio meme, the fucking Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like right there. That I recognize it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I was like, yeah, mass audiences see that and they're like, that's fucked up. That guy killed another human. Like, don't bat an eye. Don't think about the close up on the cows that happened earlier or any of that shit. And that's kind of how I took it. So I was like, I don't know. That's my takeaway.
Yeah.
I don't think the movie necessarily goes for like trying to make a point. It makes a very good like anti-meat movie.
Yeah.
As much as like using it as a setting.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I don't think that's the main
like,
purpose of the film by any means.
Not
but
at all.
It's clearly there.
It's there. It's like King Kong. Like, King Kong has its own undertoning like to it, and you can interpret it.
I do think that like the scene with the family with her at the dinner table, like this time watching it, I was very much like viewing it through the lens of like, because you do get her POV for a bit when they're like making fun of her. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about like a human that like doesn't see a pig at a slaughterhouse as its equal in any way, right? That is like joking with his buddies, right?
Yeah.
Like while they're working at the slaughterhouse, they're like smoking a cigarette, joking with their buddies, whatever, just killing these pigs, right? Just as like that's what they do. And might even be like, hey, dude, can you do it in one swing? Okay, because they're so desensitized to it.
Right, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it was like a good way to give you that feeling of like, what am I looking at? What are these things, these beings? I can't understand. Why are they doing this?
Yeah, exactly. It is that, after a while, you're just like, you compartmentalize it and you're raised a certain way or you eat a certain way and you just have to think about it this way. And you can change that at any moment, but it's like really your preference and like what you end up doing with that information. And yeah, the movie's not making that stance, but it ends up making it regardless.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting though. I really liked that aspect of it. But I'm glad that you gave me the form to talk about it because I wasn't going to fucking do it. Because everybody that I talk to is like, how somebody knows you're a vegan, they'll tell you. And I'm like, very funny. Like the 50th time somebody said that to me. Not bitter about it at all.
You aren't very outward about your veganism though.
Not really. Yeah, I try not to be because people make you feel like a dick for no reason right now. For me anyway, people are like, you wanted that. Like I saw one of my good buddies recently, and
I just brought this up so everyone would know you're a dick.
I appreciate you doing that and let people know that vegan is synonymous with being a dick. But yeah, I was just out visiting a buddy of mine, and he was like, man, he was cooking a whole chicken in the kitchen, and I was just talking to him casually, and he was like, I feel really bad right now. But he kept doing it, and I was like, why would you bring it up? I don't care. It was like talking to somebody. I talked to somebody from the Writers Guild during the strike. Thankfully, the Writers Guild has found their resolution, but the Actors Guild fucking fight on. And that person was like, yeah, I've got, the next few weeks to just do nothing. And I was like, oh, what's going on with your job? And they're like, I'm in the Writers Guild. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Not a fucking scab.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where I was like, yeah, freaking forgot about it. Totally. But yeah, those conversations, I appreciate you opening it up and asking my perspective about it. So thank you.
You're welcome, John. I was legitimately curious to hear your thoughts on that. So
yeah. And I still continue to watch the rest of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and I was looking for the same through line, and it was not there. So,
I would imagine the majority of Schlocktober movies that you watch have some sort of insane animal killing on screen.
Sometimes they do.
That one's definitely on the bingo card. That one, unnecessary nudity. Yeah, we can go around and wrap up their thoughts on whether we would recommend it or not. I'll kick it off and say yes, I would recommend it. I think it is still unsettling, just the way the movie was made. It feels unsettling. I don't think it gets to where like modern horror movies would desensitize you to it. I think anyone that would watch this would be like, "This is fucked up. This is weird."
Yeah.
And then I think it's worth watching
if you watched this movie and didn't think it was fucked
nothing.
up and weird.
Yeah. You're like, when's the Nun 2 coming out? I want to watch something good.
Yeah.
The history, the place it has in the movie genre, like what it does for independent movies, what it did to horror movies, like there's a lot to watch for that as well. So yeah, it's a thumbs up, John.
Yeah, I would recommend this movie as well. I avoided this movie for a good majority of my life because I saw trailers of any of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre stuff, and I was like, I don't know if I want to see somebody getting cut up into these pieces. That was the other thing that I actually, real quick sidebar here, is the real fear I feel like between giallo and the slasher sort of movie is in most giallos, the deaths are either unconventional, you have Tenebre's weird fucking deaths, or it's like somebody gets stabbed several times or is killed with an object and the object is never shown or that kind of thing. A chainsaw, when you watch a chainsaw cut into a tree, you can see all of the different animals that chainsaw could also cut into bit by bit. And that's fucking horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of damage, but slow damage that it could do, I think is what makes that instinctual. Fuck, I don't want that like at all. And so just always leading up to us watching it for this, I did not want to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I was not a fan of it. I also did not know if somehow, some way, this was just some pop culture snuff film that made it in. And I was like, watching it, I'm like, thank God there's no snuff in this stuff. I've seen one too many cannibal holocausts in my day. I don't need to see more practical effects brought on by eager volunteers or begrudging volunteers. So I'd recommend it. I think that it is, while it is an unsettling and horrific watch, it is a safe recovery mentally afterwards. Whereas things like Cannibal Holocaust will fuck you up for a really long time. Don't do that.
No. Oh, no.
So yeah, I would. Dixon?
Yeah. It's fucking wild that you can just like walk into a Home Depot and buy a chainsaw. Like
you don't need a background check.
No background check, no license, no safety class, no nothing. You just buy one. Fucking wild. That's not a commentary about anything else in our society. Just talking about chainsaws.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely recommend Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Again, like I said, there's a lot of shit that's really bad in it, but there's a lot of shit that's really good, and the good stuff is definitely worth the bad stuff. Just grit and bear it through the first, half of the movie, and the second half of the movie you're gonna really enjoy. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth watching, especially just given how influential it is and, what it has become in the cultural zeitgeist. You should definitely check it out.
Cool. All right. On Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, John.
Yeah, I would recommend. That's a solid look. Okay, if you're going to watch it, just know it's not Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1, but you'll still have a fucking great time. There's a reason it was remastered in 4K. Like... just a different treasure.
Is it because Vinegar Syndrome had nothing better to do?
Yeah, probably that
too. Yeah, I'm also a thumbs up on Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. It was also a wild ride in a completely different way that I enjoyed. I'm not entirely sure on like multiple watchings, but it is one of those like canon movies where you just fucking sit back and you laugh for horrible reasons. You're confused at times, and it just all around is a bizarre take. That'll wrap us up. That is 3 recommends all the way around for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I have been your host, Ryan King. Joining me today,
John Garcia, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2 both really rev my engine. You know, it's just
There you go.
Boo.
oh, sorry.
That's what we've got. These are the jokes, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody.
John wrote that
You made
one
it
ahead
this
of time.
far.
He had it on a note card.
Shut up. I did not.
Yeah, and also,
Michael Dixon, thanks as always for putting up with our bullshit.
Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.